So what we're going to look at today is some general principles of good communication. I wanted to try and give you something that you could apply in lots of different spheres of life. So not only as professional communicators, but in your fundraising, in your marketing, all of those things. So they're going to be sort of some general principles. And the way I want to do it is I want for each of you to think of a situation in your current context that is a communications challenge. And it really can be anything. And we're going to workshop that through these principles. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep splitting up into pairs, and we're going to look at different aspects of your communications challenge. And I'm hoping that by the time you walk out in an hour's time, you're going to have sort of a kind of basic solution to your communications challenge. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about a situation where I had to communicate urgently. And we're going to listen to that scenario, I'm going to talk about it, and then we're going to distill from it 4 principles of good communication. And while I'm telling my story, I want you guys to be thinking about what challenge you would like to be workshopping through this session, so that when we finished, you'll be kind of ready to jump in with something. So the situation I'm going to tell you about is something that happened to me about 20 years ago. And I was working at the Sunday Times. I was living in London, and I was living in a very typical London house, which was it was 3-storey terraced house, and it had been split up into flats. So it was a 3-storey house, and you sort of went in through the door, and then there were 3 different doors, and each one had a different flat because it had been split up. And I had come out this particular morning to go to work, so I came out, closed my flat door. So I came down to the front door, realised the front door was locked, and I didn't have my keys. So I can't get out of the front door because I don't have my keys, but I also can't get back into my flat because I don't have my keys. I've pulled the door. I am trapped in the hallway of my house, right? So this is, I think it's around 1997. So I did have a mobile phone. So I pulled out my mobile phone, and it had just enough battery left for me to see the light fade, right? So I'm stuck in my hallway, right? And I have no means of communication. So I'm panicking. And then I realize, right, there is one channel of communication, and it is the letterbox, right? That is my only channel between me and the outside world, right? So somehow I have got to communicate through the letterbox if I am to get out of the hallway before I need to pee, right? That's the thing. Okay, so I open the letterbox. And thank the Lord, across the road, they're having some work done on their house. So there are workmen across the road. I'm like, okay, great, this is what we're going to do. So I open the letterbox. What do you actually say? What do you, because do you know what? Help seemed a bit dramatic, whereas hello didn't seem quite urgent enough, right? So I'm British, so I went with, excuse me, and then I think this is the most humiliating part of the story. This is absolutely true, by the way. Excuse me, over here in the letterbox, was what I said, right? Okay, so these workmen, it was like something from a comedy show. I'm watching them through the letterbox. Okay, and they kind of go, and they turn back and they carry on with their work. And I can't get their attention. So I'm panicking again. And thankfully, down the road, I see a little old lady with one of those shopping trolleys. And she's like about 120 years old, right? And she's going so slowly. And I wait what feels like an hour while she walks down the road until she's in front of my house. And I say, excuse me. And she says, yes, dear. And then I think, it's 1997. She's 120 years old. I say, do you have a mobile phone? She says, yes, dear. She pulls out of her shopping trolley the biggest mobile phone I have ever seen. It's so big, it won't go through the letterbox. She has to phone and hold it against the letterbox, and I talk to my flatmate right through the letterbox into the mobile phone, and she comes and rescues me in a taxi. So, why on earth would I tell you that story? Because, as we know, stories are a good way of communicating. But also, I'm hoping that it illustrates the 4 principles of communication. First of all, to communicate well, we have to be clear about our purpose, right? We have to be clear why we're communicating. Secondly, we have to know the right audience. So I thought the right audience was the workman, but the right audience was the lady. Thirdly, we have to choose the right channel of communication. Now, I would have chosen any channel other than the letterbox, but it's the only one I had. So what's the right channel? And then finally, what do you actually say? Like, what's the key message? Like, what is it? What are we actually saying? What's the content? Okay, so they are the 4 principles I want to talk to you. I've tried pack there to help you remember. So we're going to start off by doing a group task. So I want you to think about what is the comms challenge that you want to workshop this morning. And I want you to do these 2 things. I want you to think about, in your comms challenge that you've thought of, what's the purpose? So in other words, what do I want to achieve by communicating? What change do I want to see? What do I need others to do to help me achieve the change I want? Because we're communicating to others. What do we want them to do? Or as we would say in marketing, what's my call to action? So I want you to think those things through, and also, who is the audience? So who needs to act in order to achieve the change I want? Or whose influence could I leverage to make this change happen? Right, so sometimes, say, for example, you might want children to use the toy that you make, but actually you'd communicate to the parents. So sometimes you've got to think a bit laterally about your audience. So who is the best audience? Right, so from our purpose, audience, channel, key message, we've got our purpose and we've got our audience. We're going to skip over channel for now, and we're going to think about our key message. So our key message is what do I actually say? And most important, how do we say it so that we're going to get other people to act on it in the way that we want them to? That's not something I know anything about, but this guy does. Okay, this guy is called Daniel Kahneman. You may have come across him before. He was Emeritus Professor of Psychology at Princeton, and in 2002 he won a Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral economics. He sadly passed away last year, but he is the guy in behavioral economics. What do we mean by behavioral economics? 2 things. First of all, how does the human brain process information? Number 2, how do we make decisions based on that information? So this guy is the world expert in what we need to do. And he had a theory about the human brain, and he said that the human brain operates on the basis of 2 systems, right? So there's sort of 2 things going on in our brain at the same time when we process information. Now, Daniel Kahneman was a scientist. He wasn't a creative, and so he called the 2 systems System 1 and System 2. System 1 brain. What do we mean by System 1 brain? System 1 is our instinctive brain. It's our gut feel brain. It's the brain that is not under our conscious control. So if I say to you the word vomit, right, you have an instinctive response to that, an instinctive sort of recoil response. You didn't think it through. You didn't think vomit associated with illness, probably not so good. You just go, ugh, it's not under your conscious control. It operates, the way this brain works is with like a cloud of associations. So when I said that word, it triggers all the things in your cloud of associations to do with the word vomit. So that's the System 1 brain. Instinctive, operates on a cloud of associations, not under our conscious control. It's when we have a gut feel about something. In contrast, our System 2 brain is our rational brain. It's our brain that works stuff out, like if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It's sequential. It goes through the steps. When I say to you, I'm going to think about that, I mean I'm going to use my System 2 brain. It's rational. It's sequential. It is under our conscious control. it works things out. So a good illustration of this is when we are learning to read, right, we're learning as kids, we're learning to read. We learn to read with our system 2 brain. So we spell out the letters. It's the word water, W-A-R-T-E-R. We spell them out, we join them together, we put them together consciously, and then we go, okay, that means water. Once we can read, we use our system 1 brain because we have an association then. We have made that link, that association with the word. So we look at the shape of the letters and we think water. We don't work it out sequentially with our conscious brain, we just think water. So what's interesting about the system 1 brain and the system 2 brain is they are doing different things. Like, why do we have two systems? Because they're good at different things and they have different purposes. So our system 1 brain, it's fast. Like when you think about how long it took you to work out a word when you were reading, other than now, it's just there. It's fast, it's efficient, it doesn't take much energy, to use. It's the brain workhorse. It's what we like using it more than the system 2 brain, because the system 2 brain is labor intensive. It takes more energy. When we use our system 2 brain, neuroscientists say that our pupils dilate, which is a sign that our brain is using energy. So it takes more. So why do we have the system 2 brain? Right, well, the system 2 brain is accurate. So the system 1 brain will give us the right answer 9 times out of 10. But if we really want to know, we have to use our system 2 brain. So the brain scan there is not just any old brain scan. That is an actual picture of my actual brain. It was a scan I had a few months ago. When the neurologist looked at the scan, I didn't want him to use his system 1 brain. I didn't want him to come in and go, I have such great vibes about your scan. In fact, do you know, my gut tells me it's fine. I wanted him to say what he actually did say, which was, I have my years of learning, I have a set of criteria, I have looked at your scan against this set of criteria systematically, and your brain is fine, okay? That's what we want. That's why we have two systems, is because they do different things. One is fast, easy, sometimes not right. System 2, accurate, but labor intensive. Okay, so why are we looking at this? Because every communication that we have with a human happens into this complex system. In fact, as Christians, we can go one step further than that, can't we? This is the way God has decided we are going to think. This is the way. So to be effective in our communication, we have to learn to communicate with both sides of the brain. Both are always going on at the same time. Right, so we're going to bring it back to communications. We need to look at, if we're going to be effective, we need to look at what the system 1 instinctive side of the brain wants, and we also need to look at what the system 2 rational side of the brain wants, and do both. So right, what does the system 1 brain want? The system 1 brain, it works in pictures, it works in associations, it wants things to bounce its associations off. It wants examples. It wants illustrations. It says, make it real for me. Show me what it looks like. Paint me a picture. Illustrate it for me, right? It's instinctive. That's what it wants. So that's the system 1 brain. What does the system 2 brain want? Well, the system 2 brain is slightly more complex because it wants 2 things, right? First of all, the system 2 brain is the part of your brain where when you're listening to a talk like this, and I have started to ramble, you think, can you get to the point? Okay, it wants you to sum it up. Give it to me like in one sentence. State what you mean. What do we mean by that? Tell me the big idea. Cut to the chase. Sum it up. Get to the point. So the system 2 brain says, state it for me, but then it asks questions, and it says, explain it to me. So it's going to ask the question, who is involved? Why is it happening? How does it work? Why is it needed? Your system 2 rational brain does both of these things. So when I'm in the hallway, so the first thing you'd want to do is state the problem. What do I really want to say? I want to say, can you help me? I'm trapped in the hallway. If somebody said that to you, I think you'd probably go, say what now? So very quickly, you're going to have to say, I've locked my keys in my flat. right? And I'm trapped in my hallway. The system 2 brain wants both of those things. Okay, so putting it together, do you see? Okay, you've got to state, explain, and give examples, SEE, to communicate to both brain systems. But here is the catch. The brain doesn't want 50% of one and 50% of the other. Remember, our system 1 instinctive brain is easy to use, doesn't take much effort. That's the one we like. So neurologists tell us we should be aiming for 90% of our communication to be examples, illustrations, and appeal to the system 1 brain. So, and the system 2 brain to spend less time. If we don't do this, what will happen is people will just trail off because they get tired. And we're not used to using our system 2 brain that much. So this is the challenge for us as communicators. So we're going to go on to another group task. And I'm going to ask you, in your situations, can you do your state and explain? So can you give, in terms of your key message that you want to fulfill your purpose, you want to send to your audience, what's the one sentence that sums up what's the big idea, that cuts to the chase, that gets to the point? What's the one sentence? Then, what are the questions that's going to throw up? Now, your partner can probably help you with that. Like, what questions do you have? And just as simply as you can, answer these questions. Okay, so we're building up our comms message. We've got a purpose. We know what our purpose is. We know who our audience is. We've got a quick statement of what we want to say. And we have explained any questions that might throw up. So we're going to move on to how we're going to communicate with the system 1 brain, the intuitive brain, and look at some examples. And so what I'm going to try and do with this is I'm going to talk to you about Christianity Explored, the organisation that I work for. And I'm going to try and find examples that fit with Christianity Explored. And then I have tried to find, as Margaret was saying, I've been studying Mark's Gospel. So I've been looking out for how Jesus uses these forms of example in Mark's Gospel. Because he made the human brain, he knows how to communicate with it. So we're copying Jesus. So for Christianity Explored, I'll tell you my state and explain. So Christianity Explored, summing it up, I would say Christianity Explored makes video-based evangelism courses that helps people open the Bible with their friends so they can hear the gospel. That's my statement. Christianity Explored makes video-based courses that helps people open the Bible with their friends so they can hear the gospel. Okay, and my explanation is people find evangelism difficult. So Christianity Explored gives them a structure for talking about Jesus and helps them handle difficult Bible questions. So that's Christianity Explored, and then I'm going to try and give you 4 examples. So here you go, examples of examples. I have stolen these shamelessly from a guy called Richard Garnett, who sadly passed away last year. Richard was a British actor at a high level, a very committed Christian who spent his time sacrificially teaching pastors to preach better from a comms perspective. He's an awesome guy. He is the go-to guy in this. He did not write a book, sadly. However, I would just say this is a taster. Google him. There's loads of stuff on YouTube, and he's amazing. So I just really commend it, and I have literally stolen this from him. So this is where it comes from. So he says there are 4 main examples that you can choose from. First of all, facts. So when we do our state and explain, we are generally speaking in the abstract. The system 1 brain says, make it real for me. What are the actual facts? So the facts, and I'll give you examples of all of these. Second, opinions. Opinions of other people. This is when you pick up a paperback book and you turn to the back and it's got some other author who didn't write the book going, this is such a great book. Okay, opinions of others. A really good way of illustrating what we're doing. Anecdotes, this is your stories. You've already heard about that, we'll dig in more. And then finally, metaphors. Metaphors are a great way of appealing to the system 1 brain, the intuitive brain. They help to paint a big picture in a small number of words. So if you're communicating, say, on a flyer or a t-shirt or something like that, metaphors can be great. So I'm going to go through each of these in turn. I'm going to give you an example from Christianity Explored and an example from Jesus. Right, so first of all, facts. Choose facts that make your message real and paint a picture in the mind of your audience. So stats can be a good way of doing this. So at Christianity Explored, we recognise that people find evangelism difficult and they struggle to handle difficult Bible questions. Research shows that 29% of UK churchgoers aren't confident that they can ask their non-Christian friends questions, can't answer their non-Christian friends' questions about the Bible. So I think what's helpful in this is, if you give me a number on that, I'm going to struggle. But I can imagine a church, and I can imagine a third of the people. Like that I can imagine. It paints a picture. Okay, where does Jesus do this? Mark 2. On the Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along. They began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is only lawful for priests to eat, and he gave some to his companions." So Jesus is asked a question about the Sabbath. Now, he could have done an abstract theological answer, but he doesn't. He chooses facts. He gives them something concrete. He gives a concrete example, which they would have recognized as fact. Okay, he doesn't respond in the abstract in this sense. He responds with the concrete facts. So facts, a good way of illustrating your message. 2, opinions. So the crucial thing about opinions is you need to think about your audience, and you need to think about who your audience likes, who is credible to your audience. Research shows that we are more likely to believe people we like, which is weird, isn't it? Because the fact that we like them doesn't make them more trustworthy, but humans are more likely to believe people we like. We find them more plausible. And obviously, you need to find somebody who echoes what you want to say in your message. So choose someone, if you want to give an opinion to illustrate what you're saying, choose someone credible to your audience who endorses what you want to say. And so, Christianity Explored, we publish books. So we have that thing where you have an author on the back. Alistair Begg wrote a couple of really good books. So we put him on the back of Christianity Explored because it builds credibility with our audience. Essentially what this is saying, without us directly saying it, is, buy this, it's a good book. Where does Jesus do it? Because this is weird, right? Because Jesus doesn't need anyone else's opinion. He's God. It's interesting, though, that he does. Mark 7. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" He replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules.'" So Jesus does not have to appeal to anyone else's authority, and he knows that. But this is good communications. So Jesus knows they're arguing with Jesus, and he goes, "Fine, argue with Isaiah." He chose someone who was credible to his audience, who said what he wanted them to say. It's not an authority point. It's just a good comms point. Opinions. Okay, 4th, stories, anecdotes. And this is what you've been obviously learning about already today. So what is it? We know that stories are great comms. We know that they're effective. But why? And why are they specifically effective in this kind of purpose-driven communication setting? And the reason is that when you tell someone a story, their brain releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is the tribal chemical. It's the chemical that makes us want to cooperate with other people. So you have a purpose in your comms. You want other people to do something specific because you've communicated with them. Tell them a story, and their brain will release a chemical that goes, "Yeah, collaborate with others." It's communications gold. Stories stimulate our brains to release oxytocin, and that motivates us to cooperate with others. So you're kind of biologically programming people with stories to respond to your comms. This guy is a quote from a guy called Paul Zak. He founded something called the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies. And this is a very much read article in Harvard Business Review. He did some study into this, and he said this: "We discovered that in order to motivate a desire to help others, a story must first sustain attention by developing tension in the narrative. And that's the key thing about this kind of storytelling. If the story is able to create that tension, it's likely that attentive listeners will share the emotions of the characters in the story, and after it ends, likely continue mimicking the feelings and behaviours. This explains the feelings of dominance you have after James Bond saves the world. Imagine you're fundraising, and you sit in front of your potential donor, and you tell them a story about how your ministry has positively affected somebody. Right? They're going to feel those same emotions. They're going to mirror and mimic those emotions, and that's going to carry on why you say, and would you consider, donating to us? So it's kind of working with the kind of, the biological grain of the human being. So Christianity Explored. This is Gerald. Gerald also sadly died last year. I realised I've chosen 3 people who died last year. It's not like some kind of presentation voodoo. It had already died when I did the presentation. Yeah. But Gerald has a great story. So Gerald is somebody who did Christianity Explored. And he said this. Our son had died, and I had a desire to go to church. We went to Ballyhenry Presbyterian, and Niall, our minister, was quick to spot us and gave me a card about Christianity Explored. I was not the best student. While doing my homework and reading the Bible, I was constantly trying to find fault. I was openly antagonistic in meetings. The adjectives to describe me would be mocking and condescending. But Niall was patient. And close to the end, I started to think, what if? What if Jesus did live? What if he did die on the cross? What if he'd risen? What if, what if, what if? After the course, I decided to read Mark again, this time sincerely. This time I was getting answers to my questions because I was listening. I asked Jesus to come into my heart and became a Christian on May 13th, 2012. Jesus did live. Jesus did die on the cross for us. Jesus did rise. And the reason I like Gerald's story is because it follows that arc that the quote was telling us about. It builds up tension. So, Gerald, it's a short, simple story, but Gerald goes to the course, and we're thinking, great, Gerald's going to find answers, but he doesn't, because he's antagonistic and mocking, and it's like, and you build up the tension, and then he says, but actually, when I read Mark on my own, I found the answers I was looking for, and we have a resolution. So a story can really be as simple as tension resolution. That is what triggers the oxytocin. And if we think about Jesus, he did this all the time. The coin is lost, the coin is found. The sheep is lost, the sheep is found. It was just a constant thing that Jesus did. Mark 4. Listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell on the path, and the birds ate it. Some fell in rocky places, and it sprang up quickly. But when the sun came, the plants were scorched, and they withered. Other seeds fell among thorns, which choked the plants, so they did not bear grain. Tension, 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 tension. The farmer is sowing the seed, and it is not finding a home. Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times. Resolution. It's the simplest imaginable story, but it's just tension, resolution. And Jesus does it all the time. So anecdotes, stories are your biological shortcut into getting people's attention. And then finally, and more quickly, metaphors. Metaphors are just a really good thing to remember because they're a great way of saying a lot in a small number of words. So at Christianity Explored, we are all about getting non-Christians to open the Bible so that they can meet Jesus. And so we say, we open the Bible with people so Jesus can walk off the pages of Scripture. Like, it's just a very simple metaphor, but it just puts a picture into people's minds. So where does Jesus use metaphors? All the time. Once you've kind of got it in your head, he uses them all the time. Mark 2. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said to them, drumroll, it's not the healthy who need the doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus is constantly using metaphor to make his point, painting pictures with words. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to break up and have a think about these. But just before I do, just remember when you're thinking through what examples to use, all of the different comms sort of types and media types you've got at your disposal. I don't have to tell you guys. The politics guys yesterday, I really drummed this in. I know you guys know this. But it's just remembering that all of these things, we can do them in text, we can do them audio, we can do them video, we can do them in image. You know, there's all different ways. We don't have to confine ourselves to just words. So you might say, well, how do I create a metaphor with an image? Like that. I could say to you, this sunscreen is so good, it's almost like being in the shade. Isn't that good? Here's my favourite. It's a visual metaphor. No one's going to say my hair was like as curly as noodles and now it's straight as spaghetti, but it's just so effective. So we just need to remember all of these things are at our disposal. And so as you talk about it, it might be, I would use an image that. It doesn't have to be verbal. And we'll wrap it up by talking about our channel of communication. So we've identified our purpose. We know who our audience is. We know what our key message is, what we're going to say. We're going to sum it up as in a statement. We're going to explain the questions, and then we're going to give illustrations and examples. So we're going to turn to what is the best channel of communication. Now, I have given you the most confusing, terrible, and aesthetically unpleasing infographic ever. I'm really sorry. I'm not a visual person. I did my best on this. I know it makes no sense. I'm going to talk you through what I was trying to get at, and I'm going to hope that it will be of some use after that. What I wanted to offer you was a kind of menu where I sort of brainstormed all of the different channels of communication that I could think of. Obviously, there are other ones. I just couldn't think of them. Letterbox, not on there. So I tried to kind of brainstorm so that to try and think of all the different ways that we could think of how do I actually convey my message now I've got my key message. And I thought probably the most helpful thing to do was to divide these into, on the left-hand side, digital media channels, and on the right-hand side, physical media channels. Because I think often that's probably one of the first decisions we make when we're thinking about how do we want to convey the message. Do we want to go digital? Do we want to go physical? I think there are two things to consider when you're choosing a communications channel, like primary things. And the first is the depth of engagement that you want to try and achieve. What do I mean by that? So, for example, I think the deepest engagement we can get is probably a one-to-one conversation with somebody. You can say what you want to say. You can respond with nuance to what they say. If you think they haven't understood, you can ask them a question and find out. So it is a really deep form of engagement. At the other end of the spectrum, so in terms of depth of engagement, the things that I think are deep engagement, I've put in the middle of the diagram, near to that axis in the middle. So if it's in the middle, I'm thinking it's quite deep engagement. On the outside, we've got things like merch, which might just have your logo. You might be wearing a T-shirt with just a logo. Now, it's still engagement, it's still communication, but it doesn't say much about you. It can be super useful, but it doesn't say a great deal about you. So depth of engagement, the first thing to consider. How deeply do you want to engage with somebody? The second thing to consider is how many people you need to reach to achieve your purpose. And that's the axis that goes from the bottom to the top. So the higher up the graph we are, the higher up the chart we are, the more people we are likely to reach with that channel. The lower you are in the graph, the fewer people you're likely to reach with that channel. So, for example, one-to-one visit, very deep engagement, but you are literally communicating to one person. Okay? Most of us, when we're trying to communicate something, don't have time to go to every single individual and have a conversation with them. So when you're choosing your communications channel, how do I best communicate my message to achieve my purpose? The first two things I suggest you think about is how deep is the communication that I need to do, and how many people do I need to reach? You'll need to take the position of these boxes with a pinch of salt, because I just sort of I used my System 1 brain and I did my gut feel. But, for example, one of them is books. Well, how many people do you reach with a book? If it's my book, just my mum. You know, if it's Pete Williams' books, many, many people. So it's like, you know, so you can't really put these things on a graph. But I'm hoping it will give you a sense of some of the options that, you know, you might not have thought of, and how you might go about choosing the different ones. The other thing I've done is I've coloured some of them in yellow and I've left some of them white, because I think that's the final factor that's helpful for us. The ones coloured in yellow are the ones that we don't have control over. So, for example, as we will know, social media channels, if you want to put something on Facebook or X, you are at the mercy of the algorithm. It's not up to you who sees your message. You're at the mercy, you know, YouTube. We've all been chasing the YouTube algorithm. You're at the mercy of that. It's not up to you who sees it. They will have control. If I say print a flyer, say if I print a leaflet, I'm in control of that. Right? I can choose whose door I put that through. It's labour intensive, but I can choose whose door I put that through. I can choose exactly what that flyer says. Right? So another example, a lot of us do now our own podcasts. If I make my own podcast, I'm in complete control of what that podcast says. I can say what I want. I can edit it so that I can edit out the bits where, you know, I spill my coffee. I'm in control of that podcast. If I'm a guest on someone else's podcast, I can say what I want, but they might edit it. And they'll have their own questions they probably want to ask me, which I'm not in control of. However, the reason to go on someone else's podcast is they may well have better reach than you have. So you might think, I want to try and be a guest on someone else's podcast because I'll reach more people, even though I don't have quite so much control. So final one I'll use as an example is live events versus virtual events. I think that's a decision a lot of us have to make in this space. So at a live event, I think the engagement is deeper because not only do people see the content, you can get to meet them. You know, they get to see you in the physical space. They get to meet each other. There's a huge comms advantage on people feeling they're with like-minded other people. So there's a better engagement, often a deeper engagement. But with a virtual event, you can just include the people who can't make it for travel reasons. So you can often just get a few more people. At Christianity Explored, we don't find it's hundreds more people on a virtual event, but we can get a few more people. So it's playing off those kinds of things. The final thing I would say about choosing a comms channel is don't forget that you can link different things together. So for example, we use social media plus outdoor signage at our church for evangelism. So we do evangelistic TikTok videos and a QR code outside church. So people in our environment can snap the QR code and see our TikTok videos. So remember, you can put the two of them together.